Yo, check out my shirt, yo. 3 Bear Bears. Hell yeah. And then there's also like a axe, and then there's like a burrito, there's like an iPhone. It's lit. I love the shirt. I bought it for myself. It's great. Be jealous. Ooh, testing. Pew, 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 pew. I remember distinctively when I had to read the Abe Push textbook, and out of all the sections I read, there was like 2 paragraphs on Asian Americans. And I was like, yeah, they came, and now there's Chinese restaurants. Yay! Like, where did Asian people come from? It was like freedom, and then slavery, and then after slavery it was wars, and then slavery still wasn't solved, civil rights, and then capitalism. Bam, U.S. history. But if you want me to be more detailed, so in 1776, when the earth was formed, we fought for our freedom, no taxation without representation, and we were like, all men are created equal, and then we poured a lot of tea in the harbor, and the British people got pissed off because they lost tea, and then we fought, somehow we won, and then we were like, yay, freedom, and then black people were like, hey, we want freedom too, and they're like, beep, 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 and they didn't say that, but it was basically like, yo, you know when we said all men are created equal, there's actually an asterisk at the end of the Declaration of Independence, and it says that when we say men, we meant white men. And it was kind of like a duh thing, so we didn't like include white men because we wanted to be more persuasive, so we said all men, but you know we meant white men. And so that's how it goes. And so Civil War, and then World War I, World War II. I don't know what order that was. I did in 11th grade, but not anymore. And then women's rights, civil rights, capitalism, bam, America. Where did the Asian people come from? Like at some point in like the 1800s, like some Chinese people came for the gold rush. Some Chinese people built the railroad. Never hears about any Asian people again. 100 years later, 1921, 1882, whatever, Chinese Quota Act, Chinese Exclusion Act. There's too many Asians now. I can't eat Panda Express every day, Gerald. I need some normal ass white people food. I need green beans and potatoes. Whatever bland food on Tasty they just throw in one pan. Like in the 1800s, there was like 12 Chinese dudes on one boat, sailed to California, lived quietly. 100 years later, there's too many Chinese people. Like, where did all these Chinese people come from? China? They're like, we can't allow too many Chinese people. They're taking all white people's job. Doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't that sound familiar? Just saying. But there's like, oh, suddenly there's so many illegal Chinese people everywhere. We didn't mention anything in the textbook, but they just popped out everywhere. Like, there's nothing for me to connect the dots on. You mentioned Chinese people in the beginning, and then 100 years later, there's too many, and then there's a Quota Act. And that Quota Act was exactly what I read. Like, the one paragraph, it was just like, something happened, too many Chinese people, blocked them. 3 sentences, done. And I went back to whatever I was talking about. Like, I understand you can't fit all that racism into one textbook. Like, the textbook was thick, and that was just on white people, black people. Like, if they want to do US history, maybe not just one book, but like a sequel, like Volume 1. How the white men oppressed black men in white America. Volume 2, how the white men versus the South Asian men of America. Volume 3, like, I understand, there's too many, like, racist things to go through. I guess I just focused on Chinese people, but like, talk about Asian people in general. Japanese people, where did they come from? Basically, Japanese people just popped in America somehow along the line. There's hundreds of thousands of them, and you didn't hear about them until World War II. And they're just like, hey, your cousins just bombed us, even though you're like 7th generation American. Your cousins, the Japanese, bombed us at Pearl Harbor, so we're gonna put you in internment camps, like Hitler did. And then they just rounded a bunch of Asian people up. And what makes them more racist is, like I said, they just rounded a bunch of Asian people up. Like, they weren't all Japanese. Like, there was a lot of Chinese people who got pulled in. Like, they're just pulling random Asian people on the street. Like, white people were just walking around like, hey, ni hao. What the fuck? Hello to you, sir? Oh my Jesus, Gerald, he didn't say ni hao back. Throw him in internment camp. Konnichiwa. Beep, 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 beep. But like, even internment camps was downplayed in the history books. Like, there wasn't that much mention of it. It was more of World War II and giving them the benefit of the doubt that they weren't trying to hide the history. It was more of like, there still wasn't any representation, or like, we still didn't talk about it, as much as it should have been. Like, we had an internment camp of Japanese people just cause, and like apparently it's just because we didn't kill all of them like Hitler did. It's not that big of a deal. Like, is that what we're teaching people now, or like what? Like, I didn't research it at all, but I heard like there was like settlements in court afterwards for Japanese people, but like it was like $5 per person. Probably, I'm exaggerating. Like, that's probably $10. It was just like, yo, you got sent to camp, like prison camp, and then the US government gives you like 10K each. Like, what's that gonna do? Like, maybe you get a booming sushi business. I assume Japanese people have sushi businesses, and they just took that shit away from you forever, and it's probably hard to get back. I guess in conclusion, try to make this an educational thing. It's just like, where did all these Asian people come from? Like, Asian people had a history too in America. Like, there are people in like Mississippi or like Alabama or something. It's like 15 generations deep American, but it's just like, it's not talked about in our history books. It just wasn't mentioned in US history. I know in this video I kind of just talked about Chinese people and then touched on Japanese people at the end, and there's definitely way more Asians and just people who aren't represented. And I think that's kind of to my point. Like, I never learned anything about these different cultures up until like I talked to my friends, and they have their own culture that they like learn. Include everyone's history, I guess. How are we gonna teach our kids that like Asian people should be represented in our media today if they're not even in textbooks? Like, they're not part of our history. And I think beyond representation in media, like just things that we're teaching our kids, we learn history so that we don't make the same mistakes over and over again. But when you're growing up, you learn things, you learn empathy, you learn compassion through just like general life stuff, and then also your history. Like, people learn that, oh, maybe like don't do this and don't do that because it might be racist, and based on what we learn in history, let's not do this again. But since Asian people aren't represented, it's easy for kids not to be sensitive about things like bullying. Asian people get bullied a lot. I don't know the statistics, but I'm pretty sure everyone I talk to is just like, yo, I was bullied as a kid. And it's not something that you think about, but maybe this has something to do with people not learning about Asians, so it's easier for them to be like not as sensitive towards Asian people. Like, we don't know anything about you, you're different, so we can make fun of you. But then if it's for like black people or white people, they're just like, oh, our ancestors had slaves, let's not be racist to black people. Like, things like that. Like, just something, just like not being represented in textbooks can cause like a big impact on everyone in the future. I don't know. Does that make sense? I don't make sense. Shoot. Just a thought.
呀，我发誓我不是你看了这点出息，我搬着你们家的电视柜，我容易入戏，我变得没有礼貌，因为你说不用客气，我想的还有很多，不止和你翻云覆雨，就来啊，放慢你的步伐啊，我不想和你的关系复杂化，跟我到台北的北边度假吧，你笑的幅度不大，好像蒙娜丽莎，这样好吗 ？Relax 好吗？我发誓从今以后再也不去酒吧，我那不好吗？求求你好吗？没有这么多人看着跟我走吧。喜欢看别的女孩就是看一看而已，这么热的天气让我荷尔蒙分泌。我想得的话 easy 不费力，但心里只装着想你，没人能对比。